You're with ET now. This is the India Development Debate, the one show on news television that puts the spotlight on development issues. I'm Sandeep Gurumurthi, joining you from the news centre in Mumbai. Joining me in Delhi is my colleague and co-anchor Supriya, Shrinate. Straight to the first debate tonight. Arvind Kejriwal is having the last laugh in his big battle with the centre over governance of Delhi. A constitutional bench of the Supreme Court, headed by Chief Justice Deepak Misra, today ruled that the democratically elected government will always have the final say when it comes to policy decisions. Not just that, the top court said that the LG appointed by the central government cannot act in a mechanical manner and obstruct the functioning of the government of the day. But it's not all win for Kejriwal too, as his demand for a full statehood for Delhi has been summarily rejected by the apex court.
Political slugfest just about continues. Kejriwal claims big victory, stating that his stance has been vindicated. The BJP, on the other hand, states that the rejection of AAP's demand for full statehood for Delhi is a wake-up call for Kejriwal. The Congress is treading a safe line, stating that it is now clear that Delhi is more of a union territory than a state, and the Lieutenant Governor and the government should work together rather than being in direct contrast and contest with each other. The Supreme Court verdict is a clear warning to the centre to stop meddling with democratically elected governments across India. And on the other side, there is also a message for Kejriwal: stop complaining and start working instead. The historic verdict in the centre versus Kejriwal battle is a big topic of discussion and debate right here on the India Development Debate this evening. And joining us is a special panel. I've got Pankaj Gupta representing the Aam Aadmi Party. He's the National Secretary there. I've got Nalin Kohli, National Spokesperson of the BJP. Sudhir Krishna, former Secretary, Urban Development and former Chairman, 5th Delhi Finance Commission. And Soli Sorabji, an extremely learned and respected voice on Indian law and a former Attorney General of this country. I'll start with you, Nalin Kohli. And, while the BJP and the AAP are in slugfest, the Supreme Court has clearly ruled that the LG has no independent decision-making power and cannot act as an obstructionist to policy decisions taken by the Aam Aadmi Party government. Isn't this advantage up? Isn't this a big victory for the Aam Aadmi Party government?
I'm sorry, I'll have to start on a slightly negative note by correcting Sandeep, because I think his introduction is legally incorrect. The apex court first hasn't turned down the request for a full state. The apex court can't grant the full statehood. That is an act of parliament alone. Second is, it's not really been a dressing down to the BJP in any way or victory for AAP, because we need to look at the facts. They lost at the Delhi High Court, and there are 9 appeals pending at the Supreme Court, including on the question of services, how do you appoint lawyers, ACB, stamp duty, etc., etc. While these are being heard, 2 are from the LG side, 7 from the AAP. At that time, a reference was made to the constitutional bench on Article 239 AA, which is basically what gives this so-called scheme or arrangement to Delhi, which is a special thing. And just to begin with, I will read only just 5 sentences from 2 paragraphs to tell you that the main plea of the Aam Aadmi Party, being that Delhi needs to be treated more like a state, and the LG has to be like a governor bound by the aid and advice of the cabinet, which means in effect they don't need to be interacting with him, only they send the aid advice and he has to what the court says. So para 196 at page 162, it is clear as noonday that by no stretch of imagination the NCT of Delhi can be accorded the status of a state under our present constitutional scheme. And the status of the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi is not of a governor, which the Aam Aadmi Party was trying to project, of a state. Rather, he remains an administrator in a limited sense, working with the designation of the Lieutenant Governor. And one sentence from para 236 at page 192. At the same time, the Council of Ministers being headed by the Chief Minister should be guided by values and prudence, accepting the constitutional position that the NCT of Delhi is not a state. So what is Delhi? Delhi is a union territory,
right,
with being the capital of India with certain dispensations.
Okay.
The issue here was, how do you run Delhi? Delhi has been running smoothly under the same scheme, whether it is under the Congress, the BJP, with conflicting governments at the center too. At the moment, the AAP, despite contesting the election, knowing what Delhi is, tried to run it like a state, which it isn't. So there was bound to be conflict. So what today the 239 AA has done in effect, the judges have said you have to follow the constitutional spirit to both. The LG can't be divorced. The LG has the power under clause 4 of 239 AA to refer to the president.
Okay,
for that, he needs to be aware of everything. So they can't divorce him from that.
I take your point. Allow me to interrupt you. I've read those operational parts, and we will debate each of those parts, including clause 4, of Article 239 AA of the Constitution. But first, let me get a word in from the Aam Aadmi Party as well. And the AAP clearly wanted absolute power and full statehood. The Supreme Court has clearly ruled Delhi cannot have the powers of a full state. Nalin corrects in saying that that the court is no one to rule on that. But like Nalin pointed out and quoted that operational part of the judgment, it's saying it's out of the question. It has even observed that there is no room for absolutism and no room for anarchy. So, Pankaj Gupta, what is it that the Aam Aadmi Party is celebrating?
I think that the first thing which has to be understood, and I don't think that Nalinji has put the things into the right perspective. Supreme Court very rightly said that LG cannot obstruct the decisions taken by the Delhi government. I think that is the gist of this whole judgment, and instead of focusing on that part of the whole operational process, we are focusing on the rest of the issues. The fact is that the work was not being able to be done by the Delhi government because there was a obstruction being put by the LG at each and every point, and that's what the contention was all about into this particular case. We all know that the Delhi cannot be granted statehood by the Supreme Court. There is no issue about that. That is only a constitutional issue, and that is why we are asking BJP and Congress to accord the statehood to people of Delhi. Where is the conflict? There is no conflict in that particular issue. I actually would like to ask the people from Congress and BJP that they have always told the people of Delhi that they will fight for the statehood of Delhi. Why don't they fight with us on this issue? Don't they want the work to be done for the people of Delhi? Don't they want that the elected government should get all the power they need to execute their policies? Is it that if they are not in power, they don't want the power to be with the government? That is the question we need to ask. Today, state government, today the Supreme Court very clearly stated today that the decisions taken by the Delhi government, the decisions taken by a government which has been chosen by the people of Delhi with overwhelming majority has to be agreed to by the LG, and he cannot obstruct. That is the gist today. And
Fair
I
point.
think there is no anarchy. It is anarchy
Right.
in the sense, anarchy in the
I
sense
would like to clarify
that
on this.
right. So I am saying that if
Okay. Pankaj Gupta, you made a broad point, and I think you made a broad point.
specifically to the
But I will
obstructionist
just
charge.
go across to the heart of this legal tussle. Okay, Nalin, just give me a minute, I'll come back to you. At the heart of this legal tussle is the interpretation of Article 239 AA, and Mr. Sudhir Krishna, I'm coming to you on this. The court seems to have cleared the air by saying that aid and advice under Article 239 AA means LG is bound by the aid and advice of the Union Council of Ministers. Where is the ambiguity? Because a lot of people out there are saying that this will, this means that there will be cases where LG can have a say. I don't think the judgment or the way it's being read leaves room for ambiguity, does it? Mr. Krishna.
Well, I think the ambiguity was not there before, and ambiguity is not there now. It was a High Court judgment of 4th August 2016 that set certain principles, and that was being followed by LG and whosoever was working with him. Now that framework has changed. In the new framework, the elected government has been given the pivotal position. So I think it may not be right to call the LG, till yesterday the bureaucracy was being called as obstructionists, and then today after the judgment it is being projected that LG was obstructionist and henceforth he cannot be. I don't think court has declared that. It has only said that it has set the framework in a new dimension, in a new paradigm. So it was the High Court which said that LG is supreme and the state government has to take the approval of LG on almost everything.
Okay.
So that is what it was.
So that's
it
an
was
important
not
point.
That the LG was deciding things on his own.
Okay,
So
that's an
therefore,
important point you're making, Sudhir Krishna, that the balance of power has tilted back in favor of the elected government. But, sorry, Sorabji, this is a technical point and only fair that you answer this. And let me quote from the order. It says, any matter, employed in the proviso to clause 4 of Article 239 AA cannot be inferred to mean every matter. The power of the LG under the said proviso represents the exception and not the rule, which has to be exercised in exceptional circumstances. The order does not say, in fact, the order does say that LG can refer decision to the president if he has a difference of opinion. So how are we to read that, that the LG can refer matters to the president if he has a difference of opinion with the elected council of, ministers? How are we to read this?
Hello?
Mr. Sorabji, go ahead.
And what's the question?
I was asking you, in some sense, is it fair to interpret the judgment and say that the LG is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers so long as the LG does not exercise his own power under clause 4 of the Article 239 AA?
Well, the Supreme Court has laid down a principle with which no one can really quarrel, that real power rests with the elected government. But the Constitution may make provisions in which the LG can act. Now the question is, don't look upon this as a victory for AAP and defeat for LG. This is something which has been worked harmoniously. After all, what are we looking at? We are looking at good governance. And good governance means both parties have to act harmoniously, not every time raise a squabble, every time raise contentions, in which case there won't be any government at all. And the people of Delhi deserve something better than that. So I look upon this as an affirmation of the principle that the real power rests with the elected government, but the Constitution itself may make provisions in which the LG can act in its capacity. Now that has to be harmonized, that has to be done in a proper manner.
Okay, hold your thoughts there, and I'll go across to Pankaj Gupta right on that note and just follow up from there. Do you essentially agree with what Mr. Sorabji is saying there, Pankaj Gupta? Because is it fair to interpret the judgment and say that LG is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers so long as the LG does not exercise his power under clause 4 of Article 239 AA? And, if that were to be the case, aren't we back to this pre-judgment?
The way I understand this whole thing is that in all matters, LG has to work and go by the aid and advice of the ministers or the Council of Ministers. On very extraordinary circumstances, only, I think as I read that there was mentioned that only in the extraordinary circumstances, LG should refer it to the President, and that too with proper reasoning. So I personally feel that now the onus is on the LG also, that he or anyone who is there should not take it to the President on smallest of the pretext, because I think in that case the situation will come back to the same situation. When the Supreme Court has said that Delhi government is supreme because it has been chosen by the people of this state, then their will has to prevail. And I think it is pertinent that the government needs to be given its space and be allowed to work as they would want to work. After all, they are responsible to the people. They are the one who are going to face the people again.
I take that point. Okay, Naren Kohli wanted to react to your earlier point, but Naren Kohli, I'm slipping in a question. Even as we debate the minutiae of the judgment, which I'm not sure too many channels will do, we've gone into the fine print, but I have to ask you, we cannot digress from the spirit of the judgment, which is that the elected government must have space, that the elected government must have real power. The court even goes on to say that the union must not usurp power on matters within the domain of legislature. I mean, the BJP central government in some sense has been accused of meddling in the affairs of Delhi government.
I will, Sandeep, very consciously answer the first part as an advocate and the second part wearing my political hat, so we don't mix the two. Because, for example, Pankaj ji also was saying the way he understood it, so I must speak now as an advocate and I'll answer your question simultaneously. That is the constitutional spirit. It's not the judgment. The Constitution does not give anyone the right to go beyond the Constitution. The rights and duties that flow from the Constitution. And therefore, it is within that spirit and within that framework that everyone, it doesn't matter whether it is center, state, grassroots level democracy, any organ of the state, the executive, or even as individuals, as citizens. So I think that is the spirit of the Constitution. And when they were quoting it, they referred to Baba Saheb Ambedkar's closing debate to say a bad constitution also in the hands of good people is a good constitution. But a good constitution in the hands of bad people becomes bad. We all have to have that duty to do our bits as per the Constitution. 1. 2, in terms of what Pankaj ji was saying, let me again decode that in terms of the legal part. Basically, in a state, the advice of the cabinet, of course the will of the people is important, but within the constitutional scheme, not beyond the Constitution. Now coming to this point, that in a state, the aid and advice is final and supreme of the elected government. If the governor does not agree with it, it is referred back and then it is binding when it comes the second time. What is here is the transaction of business rules of Delhi as well as the Delhi Act specifically says that the governor, lieutenant governor, has to be kept in the loop for everything. Why? Because under clause 4 of the, which is to the proviso to clause 4 of the 239 AA, he has the power to refer it to the president. Now you can't make a reference if you don't have full information. But it is clear in this judgment that does not mean concurrence. There is a supreme power which the Constitution from day one gave in matters of land, police and law and order, where the Aam Aadmi Party will have nothing to do or any other government. But on the other matters of list 2 and the concurrent list, while they are the ones who will decide, they can't divorce the LG from that. They have to keep him informed, not necessarily take his concurrence. But he has to be informed at the beginning. He has to be informed at the end about the entire process. That's the constitutional scheme. Now 2 political arguments about obstructionist, that he should not obstruct, etc. Let me just give you the data given before the Honorable Supreme Court. Between February 2015 and November 2017, the number of proposals received by the LG's office was 6,303. And the number of proposals that were signed and returned back was 6,082. That's 96.49%.
Right.
Only 2 were referred to the president and only 219 out of 6,300 was sent back to the government for clarification. Is that obstructionism? My last point, which is the political point that Mr. Pankaj ji was saying, why don't the BJP and Congress support? I would say this was a demand that's been there. But the way the Aam Aadmi Party has conducted itself, barging into people's homes, barging and all that, perhaps they've created a counter view in society. Should we have a full statehood if another experiment like this comes?
Okay. I think Nalin Kohli, you make a spirited argument there. Both are wearing your 2 hats, as a lawyer first, and then of course as a political, partisan politician. But Soli Sorab ji, the key is to acknowledge that the LG has this special power only in exceptional cases and not in every case. Otherwise, we run the risk of things going back to being on a standstill, like it has been in Delhi. Is that right?
Yes, it is, because the LG has powers only in certain areas which are marked out in the Constitution. Otherwise, as the Supreme Court has rightly held, the power really rests with the elected government. But the Constitution is said to make provisions where certain subjects are reserved for the LG. Now, I want to make one thing. This is not a cricket match. That AAP says, we won, you lost, you are defeated. The whole question is to work these constitutional provisions in a harmonious spirit, with debate and discussion. You can't go every time squabbling, otherwise people of Delhi won't have the effective government. And that's more important. And I think that's the spirit in which it should be worked, harmoniously, not in a, if I may say so, disruptionist spirit. And that's important. After all, you have to work out a judgment.
Sure.
And the people will work out the judgment. It depends on the people and the spirit in which they do it.
Okay, that's a fair point indeed, and that's I'm sure that the Aam Aadmi Party will heed to that point as well that you're making there, Mr. Sorabji. But Sudhir Krishna, if I could come to you, will the Supreme Court judgment solve the governance crisis in Delhi? Frankly, that's all that the citizens care about. Will this put an end to blame game? Will this solve the governance crisis in Delhi? And also, where does this leave the bureaucracy, which has also been caught in this sort of political crossfire of sorts, you know, one day seeming like it's owing allegiance to LG and whatnot. So where does this leave the bureaucracy in Delhi, and will this solve the governance crisis in Delhi?
Crisis will be resolved in Delhi now, and I would make some suggestions for all the parties involved in the matter. That on one hand, I would suggest that the Lieutenant Governor should now allow the Delhi government to take decisions and move forward. I mean, we cannot have two drivers in a car, and the matter should be settled at that, number one. Number two, even the arena which has been reserved for Lieutenant Governor, land and public order and police, I mean, in these matters also the elected government should be taken into confidence, because governance is an integrated framework. We cannot say that, you know, land management is completely divested from rest of the administration. In fact, in Delhi, a compact state like Delhi, even police matters are very much integrated with, you know, for example, traffic management and police, they cannot be segregated. So therefore, even in the reserved subject, as these are called, the three subjects, it will be advisable to develop a framework where the elected government is taken into confidence by way of regular interaction. Thirdly, both the government, state government and the lieutenant governors, they should not be approaching the courts time and again. Now take the example, now one issue is settled, all right, but what about the State Finance Commission reports? The fourth Delhi Finance Commission report, the fifth Delhi Finance Commission report which I am chairing, these are all languishing. Why should people be forced to go to court to take decisions? So therefore I think a time has come when governance should move smoothly now, and the framework is ready.
Right. Okay. Pankaj Gupta, very quick question to you. Mr. Krishna is talking about smooth governance because, you know, the stage has been set for it. But now that the Supreme Court has set the stage, now that the Apex Court has clarified on the distribution of power, will Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal get out of this victim mindset of being a victim mode? Can you assure that this will put an end to AAP's politics of victimhood, AAP's politics of activism, shoot and scoot, and you will get back to governance?
I think that we have to all understand that there are a lot of issues, there were a lot of issues, and we all must accept that there were issues. Today's judgment has created an atmosphere where, as the sir rightly said, that there cannot be two drivers on the same car. And today's judgment, if it allows one driver to take the decision and go forward, I think there should not be any reason for any conflict going forward. So, and I really appreciate what he has said about that even in the other three issues of land, police and law and order, if there is a harmonious relation being made and onus does not lie only on Shri Kejriwal, onus lies equally on both the stakeholders, whether it's the center or the state. So, if that can be made, then I think only people of Delhi would be the winner, and that is how it should be.
That's all we want, frankly, the people of Delhi to be the winner, and that governance to come back to the state, to the Union territory of Delhi. Nalin Kohli, very quick last word, 30 seconds, we're running out of time. Will this in some sense restore sanity? I mean, now that the court has drawn the Lakshman Rekha, so to say, has put up, some sort of a framework in place for governance. Now the blame game should hopefully end. Will the central government also support will the central government support the state, will support the elected government? Will the LG not interfere? I mean, will this interference come to an end? Can we see governance restored? Will the central government play its part as well?
I've given you 6,300 cases that were referred to the LG. 6,082 were returned back, were just signed. I mean, what is that interference? 2 referred to the president and 219 sent back for clarification. Look, the Aam Aadmi Party was a movement. It was a movement which came on a very healthy thing of anti-corruption, which was the Anna movement. They rode it. They came with high expectations. Delhi has rewarded them. How is it this same constitution? There is nothing new that's happened. The constitution provision is identical to what it was when Mrs. Sheila Dikshit, Sahib Singh Ji, Madan Lal Khurana, all were chief ministers with opposite party governments in the center. It worked smoothly. So somewhere introspection is needed. That why is it not running smoothly now? And certainly it's not going to happen if you barge into somebody's house and say, I'm going to wait here till you meet my demands. If I barge into your TV studio and say, unless you take me on air, and make 10 demands, would you accept that? The constitution doesn't allow that. So Mr. K, I think I would say this judgment should not be seen as a victory or defeat of anyone. It is a reiteration of the constitution principles, the constitution spirit. If we all work with that spirit, there is no scope, and there cannot be, and there should not be any conflict when it comes to the welfare of the people. But anyone crossing that limit, whether it is, I'm saying it frankly, whether it is the elected government or the LG, that would be beyond the constitution and not correct.
Okay, Nalin, I'm afraid we're completely out of time. I'll have to leave it at that. Thank you, Nalin Kohli, Sudhir Krishna, and of course, Soli Sarabji, and for joining us really with that perspective. Pankaj Gupta as well from the Aam Aadmi Party. It doesn't matter if it's AAP's victory or if it's the victory of the BJP. It needs to be the victory of the people, and it will be the victory of the people if this judgment paves the way for governance to return to the Union Territory of Delhi.
Indeed, and I think it's long time waiting when governance does return to Delhi. AAP has to get out of the mode of being an activist and get into the mode of being a government in office, take care of administration. On that note, completely out of time on this edition of the India Development Debate, but there's plenty more coming up right after this very short break.